the Historic Landmarks Commission of July 3rd. First item on the agenda is public comment. Any member of the public who wishes to address the Historic Landmarks Commission may do so for up to 2 minutes on any item that is not on our agenda. Gentlemen, are you here for general public comment? Okay. I will close public comment and go to approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of June
20th.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
I have a motion. Revised draft minutes. Okay. I have a motion by Boucher, second by Sharp. Any additions, corrections, or clarifications in the revised draft minutes? Anyone? None? All in favor of the minutes as drafted?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
I will abstain.
Okay, we have 2 abstentions, Drury and Murray. Next is the consent calendar. Kathy, what's your last name?
Allen.
Allen?
Yes.
Miss Allen?
Good afternoon, Chair Suding and Commissioners. For the HLC consent agenda for July 3rd, we have item A, which is 12 East Figueroa Street, and that was project design. It received a project design approval and a final approval with conditions as noted. And item B, 118 East Carrillo Street, also received project design approval and final approval as submitted. And today's reviewer was Donald Sharp.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sharp, for doing the consent calendar. All in favor, or who wants to ratify the consent calendar? Make a motion, someone?
I move to ratify the consent calendar.
Motion by Drury, second by Boucher. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Next item is announcements or requests by applicants for continuances, withdrawals, future agenda items, appeals, anything like that. Ms. Allen, any announcements?
I have a few announcements today. So we have the first one, Chair Suding will be stepping down from item number 2, item 101 East Cabrillo Boulevard. And Commissioner Schallenberger is stepping down from item number 1, 101 State Street. Commissioner Lavoie will be absent from today's meeting. The third announcement, a draft City Climate Action Plan has been issued for public review period through August 6th, and the City invites the public to comment. HLC comments on the draft are also welcome. A hard copy of the document can be provided by the Planning Division upon request. Ms. Baker will have an announcement in a minute here, and also the HLC subcommittee is scheduled for July 18th at 11 a.m.
Which subcommittee?
The designation.
Designation subcommittee? Okay. We will continue with staff then. Ms. Baker?
Good afternoon, Chair Suding and members of the Historic Landmarks Commission. I am here to announce that we have distributed the proposed historic resources element and a staff report that accompanies that to your commission. And this has also gone out to the Planning Commission today. We have review of this scheduled with the Historic Landmarks Commission on July 19th. So 18th, thanks. So that gives you a little bit of extra time to review this. And then also at the Planning Commission will be on the 26th. And so we're doing a lot of noticing that goes along with this. I did want to just briefly mention that we worked quite a lot with the Historic Resources Element Task Force over 21 meetings, and we're very appreciative of all the work that they have put in. And we did our best as staff to work out any edits with that group. We were very happy at our last meeting that we appeared to have done that. Unfortunately, we do need to have city attorneys review just prior to planning commission events. So they did have a few minor additional edits that they needed included in the draft. I do understand that the task force members will want to comment on those last few changes. They're listed in the report on pages 2 and 3. the few edits that the Attorney's Office directed staff to include that we did include. So if the task force members disagree with any of these changes, they're more than welcome to voice those opinions at the Historic Landmarks Commission hearing or the Planning Commission hearing. In the interest of time, we wanted to move this forward and get this into your review loop. We thought that the number of changes were small enough that they could be handled during this larger review process and get the ball rolling. It's not ideal that it happens this way. We did have a city attorney's review in April as well, but there were some things that they had missed in their earlier review. And actually, there were quite a few more comments that they had that they want us to include that staff really resisted and said, no, these were things that the task force worked out. And so we actually had to compromise somewhat with the city attorney's office, too, to get it pared down to even just these few amount of changes. So we did our best on behalf of the task force. And we do think some of the changes, for example, better defining historic resource eligible and potential may actually be helpful too. But we are interested in everyone's feedback on all of this, including the task force members. So I guess with that said, do you have anything else to add? So we look forward to meeting with you on this later this month.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Baker, and thank you to the members of the Historic Landmarks Commission that worked so hard on the historic resources element.
Chair Sutting, members of the Commission, I also wanted to
Mr.
remind
Berman.
the Commission that on July the 17th, the City Council will hear will hear an item on the agenda regarding the Mason Street Bridge project. And I've been told that Chair Sutting plans to attend that for the HLC. Is that correct?
No,
I was planning.
Oh,
Mr.
sorry,
Sharp.
excuse me, Commissioner Sharp.
he was going to check his calendar.
Okay, so is that set then? Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Berman. Any other announcements?
Yes, I have an announcement.
Turn your microphone on.
Oh. Here, it's on. As you know, our summer gathering is going to be on the 22nd, and I have a sign-up sheet here. On the left is where you put with your coming and how many of you, and then I've got all the different things you can sign up to bring: main dish, side dish, appetizer, salad, dessert. Okay?
Very good.
So I shall pass this around,
Okay.
and I shall start with you, sir.
I haven't thought about it yet.
Well, you don't have to do it yet.
Nicole, are you planning on coming?
Yes.
You might want to give it to her as well.
Passing the
You'll do a main dish, of course.
Okay, any other announcements? I have just one. Early last week, Commissioner Sharp and I met with staff, Betty Weiss, Danny Cotto, Jaime Limon, and the team members of the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. They would like to have another review by the Historic Landmarks Commission, and we had sort of closed that door the last time we met with them during the discussion workshop. They feel pretty strongly about having another discussion. However, they will be submitting plans as part of a concept presentation, and they still want to have a discussion format to that meeting. So I thought maybe what would be a good idea, and I want to hear from the commissioners as well, is to have the applicant presentation, public comment, then questions from the commissioners, and then comments from the commissioners. And after each individual commission member makes their comments, we'll give a chance for the applicant team to rebut or add to or correct any of those particular commissioners' comments. Rather than waiting till the end of all of our comments, I want to sort of engage in more of a dialogue. Wondering how people feel about that. Commissioner Jury?
Chair Sutting, does this mean that it will be a presentation as opposed to just a roundtable
Correct.
discussion like
Yeah.
you've had? I'm all for
So it's sort of a hybrid between a concept presentation and the discussion workshop.
I'm all for it.
Okay? Yes, Commissioner Murray?
Are we going to get some advanced concept review documentation to check on them before we come to that meeting prepared?
Mr. Lamone? We will. Okay. Okay. Anyone else have want to weigh in on that? You're in favor? Okay.
I'm in favor.
Okay.
Aye.
And I did speak with Commissioner Lavoie yesterday evening, and we went back and forth on it. I think it's going to be important to direct the applicant that that their response should be directed to the commissioner's comment and not go off on tangent and not get into a whole debate of things. Okay, first item on the agenda. Oh, whoops, subcommittee reports. Yes.
Chair Suding, I do have a question
Yeah, go ahead.
concerning the health of Callum DeForest. Do we know any further? I
I
wasn't
haven't
here 2
heard.
weeks ago. So nobody's heard?
I haven't.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Larson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to report I saw Callum walking, assisted, and he is in a convalescent hospital at the moment, but he was bright, cheery, and moving along, and he looked good.
Good.
So, so here's hoping. I walked a little bit with him and chatted, and then told him I was happy to see him. And
So you're trying to say that you're a stalker?
no, I
okay.
told him you all said hello, though, and we're wishing him well.
Okay, we
Thank you.
appreciate that, Ms.
Sure.
Larson. Thank
Sure.
you.
You bet.
Anyone else? Subcommittee reports then? Anyone have anything?
Except that we're having a designations subcommittee in 2 weeks,
Okay, that designation subcommittee will be on the
on the 18th.
On the 18th, excuse me. Okay, then we'll move on to the first item. First item is an archaeology report, and that's for 101 State Street. This is a proposal to demolish a 714 square foot laundry building. Miss Allen,
I believe-
or is it Miss Allen, or is it going to be?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, right. I believe everyone's already received a copy of the report, and I have Dr. Glassow's comments. He reviewed the report and concluded that the archaeological investigation does support the report's conclusions and recommendations, specifically the recommendation that an archaeologist monitor ground disturbance during construction.
Anybody have any discussion on that?
Motion to accept the report.
Ms. Arias?
The report states several places in 2 locations that garbage disposal criteria are not important, et cetera, et cetera. I find this also on page 17, and I would like to know what's the basis for this, because archaeological research, unfortunately, frequently is based on garbage disposal places, and to accept a report that says that this is not important jeopardizes future reports that might depend upon this. So I have problems with that. That aspect of the report is not being accurate, and I speak as having a minor in archaeology.
The preparer of the report is not here. They did, however, outline 4 points in which,
That's correct.
the trash pit doesn't meet, so to speak. Mr. Lamone or Ms. Rodriguez, do you have anything you can add?
We can certainly convey that question to the report preparer and
Okay.
return back with a response if Ms. Arias would like to
Okay.
get those questions answered.
I would refer to page 17, which says historic remains deposited of disposed of in a isolated grounds, underground trash pits are extremely common in Santa Barbara, but are not considered to provide unique information capable of meeting the criteria for listing on the California Register. Again, garbage pits sometimes is all you've got, and to say that they're not is disturbing.
Why don't we get a clarification from that, or on that from the
I just
preparer
don't
of
want
the
a
report?
precedent set for future reports that they can use this as to discard trash disposal sites as not significant.
So you're suggesting we postpone this?
No, I'm just
Okay.
want to put that on the record.
Okay. Duly noted then, and does somebody want to make a motion with that comment?
I will make that motion.
Do you have a,
Reading
s-
Mr. Reeves' comment.
do you have a second?
My second.
A motion by Sharp, second by Drury. And do you understand the comment, Ms. Feliciano, Ms. Allen? That the
Yes,
preparer
I
of the
think I have it.
report elaborate on why the trash pit is not a contributing factor?
Okay, and we'll report back when we hear from the report preparer.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Arias abstains. Suding steps down on the next item.
Item number 2 is 101 East Cabrillo Boulevard, the Santa Barbara Fish House.
Good afternoon. Phil Suding, Suding Design Landscape Architects.
Sky McGinnis, Skyline Construction.
This is a proposal for a patio off the side of the existing fish house building. And I have two sets of plans for everybody.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Arias?
I have to apologize. I had another point on the archaeological resources that I had noted but didn't mention, and I would wonder if we could go back and mention that point. And my only
Let's finish this project.
okay,
And
I
when the chair is
apologize.
back.
Thank you.
I apologize for that.
All right. Okay.
Okay, so we were here 2 weeks ago, and the comments were to add a finger planter to the parking area on the north side, which I actually call the west property line, to dimension the width of that planter at the back of the sidewalk between the proposed wall, and to also return with trash enclosure details for the doors and layout. So we've done that. Oh, one other comment was specify the color of the truncated domes. So I will start with the finger planter. We have a finger planter. It's 3 foot wide, and we picked an appropriate tree, which is the bronze loquat for that. It has sort of a tropical look to it, and it's a good canopy tree with well-behaved leaves. With the well-behaved roots, excuse me. And then, and we will have a root barrier around it. We have dimensioned the planter between the back of the sidewalk and the new wall, and that's going to be 1 foot wide. The architectural plans show the elevations of the trash enclosure, and this is going to be rough sawn 2x8, probably redwood, I'm thinking. And then the truncated domes are going to be terracotta red, I believe. Just let me double check that. 6. Detectable warning surface.
Color to be terracotta.
Great. I believe that is all that you... Oh, I wanted also to point out that the commission was questioning the use of the black Mexican pebbles as a ground cover. And if I may grab those two, did a bit of research and came up with some examples where they do use gravel as a ground cover. Couldn't tell exactly what color this is at the Court of Lions in Alhambra, but it is an extensive use of a larger kind of gravel. And then at the Palace of Carlos V, there is use of a dark stone. It may be set in a mortar bed, but it still has that same effect. And then at the Jardines de Albedia or Alphabedia or something like that, they also use the black stone. And then there's a Mediterranean patio that not necessarily historical, but has that look to it.
Thank you.
That concludes my presentation.
Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this this time? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the Commission for questions. Ms. Murray.
Yeah, where, I'm sorry, I wasn't here last time, but where is the pebbled,
The black Mexican.
where is it going to be?
Black Mexican pebbles, we'll go back to the landscape plan that shows up better here, are going to be in this area here, this here, here, and here, and back here. So it's sort of a ground plane material to set off the architecture of that side of the building. Of course, there's a patio here with mature planting, so we're not going to be adding anything or doing anything to that.
And are they going to be loose or?
Loose.
Okay.
About inch and a half to 2 inch, up to 3 inch diameter.
Anyone else have any questions? Marias, Mr. Winnick,
Yeah,
Boucher?
I have a question. I do have my mic on. Thank you, sir.
Not my responsibility.
I was just wondering about the terracotta truncated domes. I love that expression. In view of the fact that you're using the Mexican pebbles, is the terracotta going to be near those?
No, it's not. It doesn't adjoin the
Okay.
black Mexican pebbles in any location. And we're just putting it in this location here, here, and here. Closest it is to the black Mexican pebbles is probably 3 or 4 feet.
Okay.
But
The building itself is red.
the building itself is,
Red.
parts of the building are red.
Parts of it are red, parts of it are concrete.
Yeah. It's the chart house.
I don't visualize the red, but that's
It's on
okay.
the back side.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
The
Thank you.
paneling on the back side
Yeah.
is actually kind of a burnt orange red.
Okay, fine. Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, comments? Ms. Arias?
No comments.
Mr. Winnick? Ms. Murray?
You can say something positive.
From what I read in the last minutes, it seems like he's answered those questions. I wasn't here, so I cannot vote on that.
All right, Ms. Boucher?
I don't have anything to add.
Commissioner Drury?
I think it's a fine project.
Summing it up, looks like it's all goes here, and I agree with that. I think it's a very good solution to a myriad of problems down there.
So if we could get final approval, that would be great.
I agree. It would be.
Let's make them come back. In 2 months.
I would make a motion to
Give final approval to the project as presented.
I will second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried for final approval.
I think I have to abstain. Is that correct? Because I wasn't here.
Did you watch it on television?
Yeah, well, I didn't watch it, but I followed the minutes. And, I didn't watch it until
I don't think it matters.
it didn't matter. Okay. Yes, I will vote then.
All
Okay,
right.
thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Will you walk over these sets for final approval?
1, 2.
Pardon me, yes, you're going to take that one. And Sky, if you wouldn't mind just taking that and that. And you're on your way.
Perfect. Thank you both. We'll see you soon.
Okay. That should go with that.
Mr. Chair, again, I'd like to add, sorry. Again, I would like to add 2 points to the previous thing.
Okay, Commissioner Rios, you wanted to reopen the item number 1?
Yes, just to add 2 brief points on the review.
Okay, we have then reopened item 1, the archaeology report. And if you want to make your comments, Mr. Rios?
My 2 comments are that I want to make sure that there is creek stability in that area and that the bed location is indeed the accurate location of the creek bed, and because flooding the creek can change very quickly. And so I would like to make sure that the creek stability is mentioned and addressed in that. And the other thing is that it was originally an oil, had oil contamination, and that should also be looked at by the applicant. So those are my 2 concerns.
Okay, Sally, did you get all those? Or? Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor of reopening item number 1? Aye. Okay.
So I got the first one, but I'm sorry, the second one.
The second one,
regarding the oil.
it speaks that it was an oil, there was oil contamination, an oil tank that leaked on the site, and that should be addressed. Okay, well, I thought it was on the site, and if so, oil spreads, and it should be looked at for contamination. I'm not sure that there will be, but...
The city's remediating, cleaning up part of the city's requirements.
See, I read the document carefully.
Okay, next item. Do we need to vote on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Is that going to be just part of the motion or just questions to be forwarded to the preparer of the report?
Questions to be forwarded to the preparer of the report. Concerns and questions. Okay. Next item on the agenda is item number 3, 1321 Alameda Padre Serra. This was here 2 weeks ago on the 20th. And the motion was a substitute motion with project design approval. It was continued 2 weeks with the following comments. Provide an alternate solution for fencing or landscape screening. The landscape plan as presented is acceptable with the exception of the requested fence screening. Study a concealment of the electrical service equipment and exposed conduits. Continue working with neighbors on their concerns. Okay. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves for the record and give us a brief presentation, please.
Yes, hello. I'm Lillian Donor, and I work at Santa Barbara Middle School in the...
We're going to introduce all of ourselves.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm Lillian Donor.
With Piker Group.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Scott Hopkins with Piker Group
Welcome.
Architects.
David Black, landscape architect for the project.
Welcome.
Lily just wanted to make a few comments as we start the process, and then I think Scott and David will go through the drawings.
Okay. Go ahead.
I am here. I wanted to assure HLC that Santa Barbara Middle School is actively working with in our neighborhood and has been for the last 2 years. And we've prepared a summary of the steps the school is taking, starting before we move to the Jefferson campus, and we plan to continue our efforts to be a good neighbor. And I've attended most of these meetings as an intermediary from middle school with the neighbors, immediate neighbors, and the neighborhood at large, and the Riviera Association.
Okay.
So
Very good. Yes.
I
We
have
appreciate that.
a few points I could make.
Okay.
Starting in September of 2010, our head of school went door to door and introduced himself to all of our neighbors. And a subset of our board of trustees and staff has met with the Newton neighbors nearly every month since October of 2010, sorry. And our head of school and trustees have met with the Riviera Association at least 6 times. And then there's more efforts too,
Okay.
so thank you.
Okay, so we'll submit that as part of the record.
Oops, sorry.
You want to, thank you. You want to go on with your presentation?
Sure. So I'll walk you through the architectural, then David can walk you through the landscape. So once again, just to refresh everyone's memory, we're constructing a sound wall, a small storage shed, and then some fencing around the basketball court.
Yeah, if you want to use the pointer.
Pointer would be next.
Custom.
I won't walk off with it. Okay. So flipping to the next page, you can see the shed is the CMU shed. It's a shed roof that backs up against the sound wall. Very traditional Spanish details. We'll look at those in a minute. There's a few vents here that get covered with the finished coat of the plaster. And the sound wall is, as you saw before, and we've got details for that as well. So once again, very traditional Spanish details with kind of the coped edge at the eave side, very just a curved edge as well, no gutter, and no messy flashing where it meets the wall. It's coped in with grout. And at the top of the wall, very straightforward details, just a pointed cap at the column where the wall terminates, and then the steel tubular fencing that gets covered up with David's new landscaping. If there's any particular detail you want to talk about, we can come back to that. David, do you want to move on to the landscaping? I'll leave the pointer.
L1.
Towards the back.
Third from back.
I think the chair has indicated that what we showed the last time was acceptable, and the only addition that we've made is vine pockets along the proposed tubes or iron steel fencing around the basketball court. So that's essentially what we've added here. We have drip irrigation everywhere, which is included as part of this set. Backflow preventer to be screened. That's indicated as part of the drawings as well.
There was one other item on the fence. There was concern last time that the fence was too tall here. I think it was 10 feet. We've lowered it to...
The transition was awkward.
Yeah, the fences are 2 different heights. One was 6 feet, one was 10 feet. So to ease that transition, we've lowered this fence from 10 feet to 8 feet.
I'm sorry, again, this one was 8?
This is 6.
6 and 8.
This is now 8.
Okay.
That's right.
Are you finished?
I think it's...
Yeah, well, we'll go into those comments.
Okay.
You're finished?
That's the extent of it, yes.
Okay, what about the concealment of the electrical service equipment and proposed conduit and existing conduits, exposed conduits? Can you address that?
Staff has a
Mr.
comment.
Chair, what we'd like to have the commission consider is that we break out that issue and deal with it separately. The middle school has committed to come back in 6 weeks to deal with the permanent
So that
solution.
would be a separate application?
Yes, because
Okay.
it's not an easy fix, and we don't want to delay the school from proceeding.
Okay.
We're going to break it off.
Then our minutes should need to reflect that somehow.
I would think today's motion would make
And
that clear.
Just, I want you to know that the school is working with the property owner whose permit it was to resolve the issue, and they're working diligently. And they've taken just a couple of steps in the interim before a permanent resolution.
We're going to be talking about that later, so
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
But we don't want to confuse the issue. Okay, public comment. I will open public comment. I have 2 speakers. First one is Paul Welterlin. You'd think I would know that by now. Welterlin. Followed by Barbara Kellner.
I'll make tags next Hi, my name is Paul Welterlin, here yet again. I just have a couple of comments, and I want to just say that I don't think the comments should hold up the approval that they can, be building the acoustic wall over the summer, which is, of course, important to the neighborhood as well. My comments today are mostly about the perimeter landscaping and the landscape buffer, and particularly I wanted to focus on the frontage on APS, the frontage of the school to APS and that particular landscape buffer. Historically, when Brooks was there, it was a very thick, generous, dense, high, contiguous landscape buffer that, of course, shielded the school from people looking in, and it shielded the neighborhood from the noise. And actually, all the neighbors on that corridor on APS, practically every house provides thick, contiguous, dense, tall landscape buffers to their properties. The landscape buffer that exists now has somehow been let to deteriorate over the last 4 or 5 years, and now really doesn't present really any kind of a contiguous barrier. It doesn't really present anything that's that really prevents or creates a landscape buffer. What I'd like to show you is I have a historic picture of the school, which, as you can see, the frontage to APS right there, very thick, very dense, very contiguous, complete landscape buffering, which was there, and like I said, has been allowed to deteriorate. So what I'd like to request is that this be restored to that level, and that it be maintained at that level. I mean, particularly because of the additional outdoor activity that the middle school is now going to be engaged in. I think the landscape plan, as I've seen it, falls kind of short of that goal. And I would like to see, and you can even see in that picture that there is hedge work along the railing. It's a little bit difficult to see, but there was hedge work that was at least up to the top of the railing.
I'm not following which railing you're...
The railing, there's a very thick metal railing right along APS.
Right here.
Yeah. And there's a hedge work right where you're pointing right there. There was hedges planted up there, and in the last 4 or 5 years, I don't know, they let them deteriorate, they pulled them out, they did a lot of stuff to them.
What year was this photo taken?
I'm not sure, but I suspect it's around 2006 or 2007. It was taken from actually an article from The Independent, but I wasn't able to find the exact date. So I would like them to, I understand that landscaping takes time to grow, and a buffer like that will take time to establish itself, but I'd like to see that there's enough plant work and enough hedge work there to form that real contiguous, thick, dense, generous kind of landscape buffer to the front of APS. And it would also look nicer, too. The second thing that I want to bring to your attention in this picture is the parking lot area. And I know that there was some controversy and some confusion about what was actually in the parking lot before the middle school took possession. And as we can see, there's no lunch court, there's no covered walkway, and particularly there is no basketball court, there's no sports court, there's no playground of any kind, if you can point to the spot where it is now. And what I would like to request is that the city, and either the city and the applicant or this commission, strike all references to an existing basketball court in the record. And the reason being is that I think that in the future, if anyone researches this project to figure out how this whole thing came to pass, I think it should be absolutely clear that prior to the middle school taking possession of the property, that there was no basketball court, there was no playground, there was no outdoor activity of any kind on that property.
You have about 30 seconds.
That's my comment.
Okay. I just wanted to respond to the vegetation along APS real quickly. It may have been selectively removed due to fire concerns. Generally, from what I'm seeing with the existing landscape and what I know of the existing landscape, it has a pattern that is very typical of what the fire department requests. So just
if you also look on the picture, if you go farther to the east, which is then our property.
I realize that many homes along APS do have thick vegetation. Two wrongs don't make a right.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Is it possible to ask public comment, ask a question of
Yes,
that comment?
sure.
Are you interested in the screening just for visual reasons to just cover the school?
Two reasons, visual and acoustic
Well,
screening.
I don't believe that there's any
Vegetation
benefit.
doesn't attenuate any sound. This psychologically it may,
Right.
but it decibel-wise does not decrease, believe it or not, the sound levels. Vegetation.
So a thick level. Okay.
So it's at least a
but
visual.
it's visually, and this was also something I don't want to take any more of your time, but something that was spoken about at our very early meetings that Ms. Donner was talking about was that the idea was that the middle school was going to make this a much more beautiful area and a much more appealing curb appeal, and all the homes along that corridor have really developed.
I'd actually like
buffers.
to see current photos. Do you, Ms. Allen, have current photos in your file?
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Welterlin. Welterlin. I almost screwed it up, but
And on the last set of plans, we have full photos of them.
yeah. Okay. That's somewhat of the front. I just real quickly wanted
Do you have the
to.
last set of plans?
That's about as good as we're going to get. There's a little bit more.
The set we brought in last on the 20th.
Okay. Well, we're going to move on then and go to the next public comment, and that's Barbara Kellner. Ms. Kellner? If you could just hold 1 minute, Ms. Kellner, please. I'm sorry. So that shows the landscape as it exists now. That shows the landscape as it exists now. Okay. Another one there, too. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I apologize, Ms. Kellner. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Barbara Kellner, and I'm glad I could be here. I usually work on Wednesdays. So,
Well, welcome.
thank you. So I'm
You want
the,
me to write you a note?
Well, it's Tuesday.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. So I just wanted to also, I'm the next door neighbor on the east side, just wanted to get on the record how important I think it is to have these screening, the landscape screening. I don't really have anything new, but that's really important to us. And again, I was one of the very first meetings that we had with the middle school, asked the school what they were going to do for us, and they did say make the neighborhood more beautiful. And so far, we're really far from that. So I'd just like to hold them to that.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Kellner. Seeing no more public comment slips, I will close public comment, bring it to questions from the commission. Commissioner Schallenberger, any questions? Pardon? Okay. Commissioner Rios?
Yes, I have a question. The vacant area below the school, which you now have designated as soccer practice fields. At the last hearing, when parking was being discussed, there was a question about how much parking, and one of your staff members stated that they needed the parking for the parents to watch the games. Are you going to have a soccer practice field, or are you going to have actually games with other schools which will bring in parents? Perhaps the lady who...
I think there might have been some confusion about that, but basically the parking that we have was required by the CUP, and so removing any additional parking, the city requested that we not. Parents do come and watch the basketball games. Soccer games aren't currently played on the campus now. They're played on other campuses.
They will be played on other campuses.
Yes.
So that is a continuation of the conditions of the previous occupant, that they will be on other campuses.
They're going to be on other campuses. They
Thank
don't
you.
have a regulation soccer
Thank
field
you.
down there.
Question, Commissioner Winnick? Commissioner Murray? Sharp?
No question.
Commissioner Boucher? Commissioner Drury?
Yes.
So all this basketball court and the walls are about sound abatement, and what if it doesn't work?
Would you? Yeah, well, we actually hired a noise consultant to test it for us, and we have a study prepared that shows that it does reduce the noise levels to actually where they are now. But I think it's important to point out that the noise that's generated from the basketball court does not violate any city standard. City standard requires 60 average decibel of 60 for outdoor living areas, and even with the court and no wall, that's not violated. So, the school is making every effort they can to try and mitigate that because they understand that it's a different situation now.
Does the city have a copy of that noise study? The planner?
I think so.
Yeah? Okay, just curious. Then another question is, other than, what we're seeing here on Mr. Black's wonderful landscape plan, what else have you done to beautify the neighborhood as you had promised to the neighbors that met with you, as communicated to us by Ms. Kellner? Real quickly, anything else that you've done?
Yeah, there have been a number of additional plantings that the school had put in when they first moved in. And I have a list somewhere in my file that I could go over. But they had done some additional plantings up here. I know that down along the bank on the field, they'd done some additional plantings there.
Okay.
And, okay, I can submit some of this information for you. They've done some additional plantings down on the eastern, we're not showing the field, but there's some plantings along the eastern area because when they came in originally, they had to cut back a bunch of the dead vegetation. So they've done some plantings along the fence line. So, and then with this plan, they wanted to put a significant amount of vegetation here to block the view of the parking lot from APS, which was not there before, and then doing some additional plantings up along the boundary. We did talk to the neighbors about a hedge up there and talked a little bit about the fact that the code and the ordinance requires a limit to the height of the hedge, so it didn't do a lot to screen. So that was why we had come up with these alternative schemes that David has shown on his plan. And then, of course, all the improvements to the school. They've made a number of improvements to the school, many of those interior. But, and in addition, while the neighbors can't really see this, they'll be doing a lot more planting in the landscape islands.
All right, well, we'll move to comments. Commissioner Schellenberger.
First comment is I find this line of discussion about the landscape inappropriate at this juncture. The meeting motion that was approved was the landscape plan as presented is acceptable with the exception of the requested fence screening. So my feeling is the only thing we need to be talking about today in regards to landscape is the fence screening acceptable? Everything else we've covered in previous meetings, and the time for that has passed.
That's not true, Commissioner Schellenberger. We have members of the public that have brought up the landscape along Alameda Padres, so that's why we are addressing that portion.
That could have been reviewed at any previous time.
It wasn't brought up, Mr. Schellenberger, at that time. So it's
this
new
is
information.
This is too late in the game for that is my point.
I understand your concern.
The second, we've already discussed the electrical equipment is going to be deferred to a future review. That's totally acceptable and fine. And I find the alternate solution for the fencing and landscape screening acceptable. I think that they've made the effort and responded to the Commission's requests and requirements, and they're within the guidelines, and I find the proposed submittal acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Arias?
I think that the landscaping plan is really out there. It's really well done. And I'm glad that they clarified the position on the definition of games, because I was concerned about that. But I think the landscaping plan will enhance and improve it, and will eventually achieve what the neighbors want. So I commend you on that.
Commissioner Winnick?
I'm in favor of moving ahead with the project. I do want to address that one neighbor's concern about the documentation about whether or not the basketball court is designated as existing versus just having it listed as basketball court. I've recently experienced a problem with a project I tried getting approved through the city, which unfortunately had slipped through as existing, which shouldn't have said existing on the drawings before me. It's something I inherited. So I think that kind of, it gets really messy later on. Future property owners, when they buy a property, if it says existing and it's not, it actually is difficult for them. So I think that designation should just be, the E should be struck from in front of the word basketball court, and I think that would clarify it. And I think the landscaping is a good solution, and I think the project's ready for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Would you mind having the applicant explain that one more time? Because the
basketball court?
Yes, the existing nature, quote unquote.
Yeah. Mr. Chair.
Just a second. So I'm not interrupting you by flipping pages. Go ahead, Ms. Plowman.
It is existing now, and it has been there for a year. And the question about whether it was, I think Mr. Welterlin is bringing up a question about whether it existed when the middle school moved in a year ago, and it did not. We recognize that but it does exist now, and it exists as part of, it was existing when we prepared these plans, so that's why it says that on the plan. So, and I think it's been made clear that that's allowable. Betty Weiss came down and explained that, and so, I mean, it's neither here nor there to us whether or not
it has an E in front of it.
It has an E in front of it, but the fact of the matter is it's been there for a year and been in use. Yes.
Commissioner Schallenberger has the floor. Go ahead, Mr. Schallenberger.
It is not just here nor there. I'm saying, my understanding, the planner for this project explained that they were allowed to make it a basketball court without, there's no permit required.
That's correct.
So it is an existing basketball court.
That's
the
true.
fact that it had no previous review has nothing to do with the issue of whether it's existing or not. There was no review required. So I think the applicant is correctly identifying it, and I don't want to see it change to something that's incorrect. The property owners are free to do certain things without review, whether we know that or not anymore. But it is an existing basketball court, and I think it should be left as such. That's just because it didn't have a permit process doesn't mean that it wasn't. Thank you.
Where did I leave off? Commissioner Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I recognize what Commissioner Schallenberger says, and there is the motion states in number 4, continue working with neighbors on their concerns. So that's part of the motion. So it means that, to me, it means that the neighbors have brought this concern, and I think it's good to work with them. I do recognize that that kind of landscaping is a character-defining part of that whole area, not just your neighborhood, but as you go along. So, but this is a school, and they've done some work here, so I just think it's one of those things where, you know, it's in our motion. It covers it that they could still work with neighbors on those concerns.
Okay, Commissioner Sharp, any comments?
Yeah, I agree very much with that our motion included continuing to work with the neighbors. And landscaping along APS is part of that, and I think we should require and look at a landscape plan that does propose that landscaping.
Okay.
Other than that, I think they've done everything we've asked them to.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Rios? No, you're not.
They stated at their last meeting that their plans have been approved by the fire department, correct?
Correct.
So if we change things, where does that leave you with the approval by the fire department? I sent an email to Susan, and it was forwarded to Mr. Lamone, requesting what's the difference between the fire department approval and our landscape approval and things like this, because I see we're possibly requiring two different things of the applicant, and we should be on the same page. And I never got a response back, so I don't know. if we do any changing with the landscaping, like increasing it on APS, is that going to go counter to the approval by the fire department? I don't want to put you people in a difficult position.
Commissioner Rios, if we made substantial changes to the landscape, it would then have to go back to fire department to review and get an approval. So it would have to be almost like a review after final.
Yeah, I'd like to be on the same page with the fire requirements for us and them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was my request.
Okay. Commissioner Boucher, any other? Oh, did you want to respond to that, Mr. Lamone?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I think it would be appropriate to request the feasibility of additional landscaping consistent with the city's fire standards and also height limits, because there is a front property limit. They would have to either have an open mesh fence on a school property or bring it back 10 feet from the property line in order to increase the height. So there are some flexibilities there, and we could coordinate that feasibility with those departments.
I think that would be a good idea to do.
That's exactly the direction I was going to take it. So, okay, Commissioner Boucher. Microphone. First, I'm just going to call you Commissioner Microphone.
I would second Mr. Sharp and Fermina's comments.
Okay. Commissioner Jury.
I will do the same. I just, once again, encourage the neighbors to articulate their concerns, and hopefully the middle school will work with them properly.
Okay, anyone else have any additional comments? My comment would be that the applicant continue to study adding additional landscaping along APS that is consistent with high fire design. But this project is here for final. Does somebody want to give it, does somebody want to make a motion?
Move for final approval of the project as presented.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion by Drury, second by Sharp. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Commissioner Murray abstains. Okay. That's part of the motion. That's, yeah.
Mr. Chair, so I take it the landscape plan is not approved yet to its entirety. They could return the landscape.
I think they could return to staff on that.
Well, is there a time limit on additional landscape work?
Yeah, I don't know. This does get tricky. The cleanest way to do it would be for us not to be approving the landscape plan, but approve the rest of the project. Yeah. Okay.
No.
I think this is a case.
Yep, jump in.
Mr. Chair, this is a case where I believe that remember, this is an educational institution, and they are bettering this property over what it was last, and if it has deteriorated along APS, it was deteriorating while Brooks was running it, not while middle school was running the campus. So I think they've done a lot of work to go above and beyond what some institutions would be required to do, and I think it would be great to include in the motion that we'd like them to continue working with the neighbors to improve the landscape at the street level, but not to make that a requirement of this project for approval.
You know what? I think I'm fine with that as well. Is the maker of the motion okay with that?
Absolutely.
So it's a suggestion in the motion to continue working with the neighbors on improving the landscape along Alameda Padre Serra. Okay, we had a vote, and is unanimous with one abstention. An abstention was Murray. You understand? Okay, you're on your way.
Good school. My kids, my grandchildren.
Yes, I did. I want to thank the neighbors for sticking through this and coming. We appreciate that very much.
Yeah, well, we do.
Very much.
So we'll take those to Scott.
What?
We're 10 minutes ahead of schedule. I'm going to call a 5-minute recess.
Impossible.
Waiting for 13 revised sets. So what is the date?
Besides, that's an historic one.
So we have a different report.
Say what? It's expensive for sure.
Yeah, no, I just want to know why she has so many.
Quiet, please. Mr. Black, that means you.
Item number,
Quiet, please. Okay, we are on item number 4, 101 West Montecito Street. This is a historic structures report. Introduce yourselves for the record.
Michael Berman, Planning.
Okay. Is there anything you need to discuss about the historic structures report before we go into questions?
Chair Sitting, members of the Commission, only that I have reviewed it to ensure it's consistent with Master Environmental Assessment, and I found it to be consistent with MEA.
Okay. Do you have any questions? Do you want to add anything, Mr. Rodriguez?
I just wanted to let you know that I also did review I reviewed the project and the report, and I do agree with its conclusions and recommendations. And we also discussed the tree. There is one, they call it a date palm in the report, but we've concluded it's a Canary Island palm. And it is...
It's actually Canary Island. Date palm is...
Okay, we were trying to clear that up all morning. So
should have just called me.
The issue is that they're going to move. The plan was to relocate it, but we have found that relocating might 90% chance of killing the tree. So we are. The plan would be to replace it with a 20 to 25 foot matching species.
Okay, and that's in the next proposal that we will be reviewing following this. Okay, so questions from the Commission. Any questions? Commissioner Arias.
Yes. What is the capacity of this tunnel that is proposed to be built?
Chair Sitting, members of the Commission, this bypass culvert together with the channel will carry 3,400 cubic feet per second.
Which is equivalent to what storm level?
Roughly at 20 years.
So what we have now is, existing now is a 10-year capacity approximately?
Chair Sitting, members of the Commission, I believe it's a 6 to 8 year storm.
Okay. Did you do any consideration of increasing the capacity beyond, of this tunnel, beyond what you're proposing? And the reason why I ask this is because it's so disruptive to a historic area of the city. And 20 years isn't very much.
We only want to do this once, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well,
Okay.
and we've all seen photographs of the flooding down there, and we know it's. So, have you considered doing higher capacity?
Chair Sitting, members of the Commission, this project is part of a larger project known as the Lower Mission Creek Flood Control Project. As a part of the Lower Mission Creek Flood Control Project, there was extensive review. It's been going on since, I believe, the mid-1960s. And during that review, there was a feasibility study that was done by the Army Corps of Engineers to determine a balance between acquisition of property and cost issues and environmental impacts. And during the preparation of that study, they determined that the balance that the partners in the project, that would be the County Flood Control, City of Santa Barbara, and Army Corps of Engineers, would be able to pay for would be something that would convey the 3,400 cubic foot per second storm. So the short answer to your question is, yes, they have considered enlarging this segment alone wouldn't really solve the Lower Mission Creek Flood Control Project's flood control capacity issues because they are complex and relate to the whole drainage and not just to this segment. So if they had to make this portion larger, it wouldn't solve the flooding problems because everything else is going to be sized for roughly this size storm as well.
Yeah, it's also money too. Why don't you just leave it on? You're going to be asked questions.
Chair, sorry, member of the Commission, it is partially a money issue. It's an extremely expensive project, over $100 million. And the money is not available easily. So the city decision makers, in this case the city council, made a balancing decision. On the one hand, environmental costs to real estate and the environment, and on the other hand, the cost to the taxpayer, and determined that this was what they were willing to accept, and that's what they approved.
On page 16, it talks about a test panel of cement, which would be improved by the project engineer. Would you have any objections to that test panel being approved by the HLC? Because they tend to, it is a historic area.
Chair, certainly members of the Commission, I think it would be appropriate to have someone from the HLC. It might be a little unwieldy having the whole HLC go out to the site and look at this test panel. It's fairly large. It's on the site. I don't think it's easily transported. Maybe it would be better if the Commission could designate a party or two to go out and determine if it matches.
That's what we've done in the past.
And I have some good news on the subject. I was at a conference with the contractor who's going to be constructing this project, and it happens to be the same contractor that constructed this parking lot in the first place in the 90s. And he told us that the concrete that they put in there was etched with acid, and that's why it has the aged appearance. And so now we believe we'll get really close to the original color. So hopefully we're going to do a whole lot better than we did in the past on this issue.
Okay. May I continue with another question? On page 16, you talk about the visual screen on 101, and those trees are going to be removed.
The 11 bush cherry trees.
The cherry tree.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
the cherry trees. Have you considered retaining those trees until the additional planting on the side of Montecito Street is up high enough to give you that screening? I don't know. I would like to avoid 101 as much as possible.
I'm wondering if we shouldn't discuss this stuff more when we're talking about the actual project.
I was wondering that too. I mean, it is mentioned in the historic structures report, but the sort of the mitigation or the offset landscape is not really discussed in here, and it's more on the next project. So you want to hold that question for the next?
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, David Black, landscape architect. Just a short answer, Commissioner Rios, is the construction is going to start, and as soon as it starts, those trees will have to come out as part of the construction.
Okay, well,
so it's not a matter of delay.
that solves answers my question. Thank you. Okay.
Any questions, Commissioner Schallenberger, Commissioner Winnick? Nope. Murray? Sharp?
One quick question. Could you reiterate why we can't move the palm rather than throw it away?
Chair, sitting members of the Commission, I spoke with the city's arborist this morning about this issue, and what he told me is that this tree has essentially stopped growing. It's at the end of its life cycle. That because it has stopped growing, it'll be very sensitive to a major event that affects it, like being relocated, and therefore the chances of it surviving are low. 90% he gave it. A 10% chance of survival.
Right. I was going to correct you on that.
Yeah, 90% chance of it dying, 10% chance of it surviving. His recommendation was that we replace it with another tree of a similar of the same species, but we wouldn't be able to approach that size of the tree. I think it's close to 100 foot. Best we could be able to do commercially would be around 25 feet. I subsequently heard that there may be some disease issues with the species, and we can get into this on the actual project, but it may be better to replace it with another tree, but it's up to the HLC if you find that acceptable. But we can talk about that in the project.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Boucher? Commissioner? No. Okay, any questions from any of the commissioners? I'm sorry, comment. Thank you. Anyone? Okay, then we have a report in front of us. Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Drury, a second by Boucher. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Yes, next item on the agenda is 101 West Montecito Street, and this is a proposal for a new subsurface culvert to extend from the north side of the Southern Pacific Railroad tracks to the north side of West Montecito Street.
Yeah.
Okay, the last time we saw this
She's going to hand out the same stuff.
was back in February of this year, February 1st. It was continued indefinitely with the following comments. The project is ready for project design approval. The plan should be simplified to communicate the aesthetics more clearly. Provide a landscape plan prepared by a licensed landscape architect. Include plans for replacement of the bush cherries. Provide an amended historic structure site letter report addressing the removal of the trees and the impact of the proposed changes to the site. Provide the arborist report that was prepared with respect to the Morton Bay fig tree. All proposed replacement materials shall match existing. Excuse me. The entire chain link fence within the project shall be black vinyl coated. Okay, if you please give your names for the record and a brief presentation. I guess you guys need a plan out here.
Michael Berman, Planning.
John Lawson, Project Engineer, Engineering Division.
David Black, Licensed Landscape Architect.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. We are bringing this back to you just for clarification. The agenda has it as final review approval. Engineering staff would like to rescind that and request project design approval. At this time, the landscape plans and tree removal plan are at a level of preliminary stage, so it technically is not ready for construction. So with that, I'd like to put that on record that we will be requesting project design approval. As Michael Berman has introduced the project, Reach 2B project is the construction of a concrete box drainage culvert that'll be from the north side of the railroad tracks.
Point to the plan, please.
Okay. Okay, thank you. From the north side of the railroad tracks to the north side of Montecito Street, also known as Reach 2B Phase 1. There'll be two phases to this, but what you have in front of you is Reach 2B Phase 1. And this will entail the construction of the culvert within the park area, the Martin Bay Fig Park area. And I'd like to go down the motion items here and just address them one by one. We do have here a plan that's prepared by a licensed landscape architect, David Black. So with that, I'd like to take this, I'd like to have David Black take this opportunity to describe the landscape plan and tree removal.
Thank you. Actually, I'd like to start my presentation by advising the Commission of actions that have been taken by Parks Department, specifically the Street Tree Advisory Committee and also the Parks Commission. The Street Tree Advisory Committee has reviewed the plans, or had reviewed the plans, subsequent to my participation here, but and acknowledged that, or approved the removal of 3 jacarandas on Montecito Street. Well, actually it says 2, but there's actually 1 Phoenix canariensis date palm, the 11 bush cherry trees. Yeah, this is the tree removal plan. Now, we've indicated that these existing Washingtonia robusta palms are also going to be removed but replaced, and that will reflect itself in the plan. But for the purposes of construction, they will have to be removed as indicated by this plan. So here are the 2 jacarandas, and there's the bush cherries, and then the 1 Maryland date palm here. Right here. Oh, sorry, here. Yeah, that's the Washingtonia. Okay. Then the plans, as they do after they go to the Street Tree Advisory Committee, that approval has to be approved by the Parks Commission, and the Parks Commission had their own set of recommendations, conditions, and I'd like to go over those now. And my reason for doing that is because it has some bearing on some of the design elements that we're showing on this plan now. They wanted to see improve access around and through the park, improve measures for long-term maintenance of the park, improve public safety, consideration of proper amenities for the park, including trash cans, benches, and whatever else would be deemed appropriate, making the park a more inviting space, protecting the fig tree, and consideration of the integrated pest management program. And aesthetics of the park is important with electricity and other boxes that need to be there, specifically that they be well placed. So those were the comments from the Parks Commission. And now to the plan. I think the plan is pretty much straightforward. Obviously, as the Commission has indicated, the installation of the culverts, construction of the culverts will have a significant physical impact on the site, on the historic site, necessitating the removal of 2 trees here, the bush cherries, the upset of the existing lawn area, the removal of or relocation of the existing Canary Island date palm, and then the relocation, or replacement, I should say, of the existing Washingtonias, which are part of the existing depot parking lot. In light of the comments from the Parks Department, we sort of just took it upon ourselves, well, what could we do to improve the aesthetics and or the function of the park? My general thinking is that I'd like to keep it kind of simple. I'm not looking to propose anything significant that would sort of impact the historic context of the site as I see it. I'm sure most of you remember I was involved with the restoration work that was done some 20 years ago. Yeah, 10 years, 11, 12 years ago. It's interesting because at the time I had recommended the removal of the bush cherries at that time because I felt they weren't historic. I think that's been confirmed by the Historic Structures report. But this commission said no, let's keep them, and that's why they're there. But be that as it may. So the only other components that we are suggesting design-wise, sort of in response to the Parks Commission, is to introduce some sort of park amenities, if you will. And what we're suggesting is outside the existing post and chain structure around the Morton Bay Fig, we are suggesting perhaps expanding the decomposed granite, which is essentially the border all the way around, and it extends along the parking lot and around the existing rail car. And so it's out beyond there. We would suggest installation of some benches, trash receptacles, a bike rack at this location here, and then also the introduction of some proper signage. There are existing 2 signs there now. One's here and one's over here. They're sort of falling down, broken, and we thought, well, maybe there might be an opportunity to just sort of update the sign apparatus as illustrated here. these are just illustrations of benches, sort of a turn-of-the-century bench. Maybe it could be the same ones that we have on State Street. But, the station with the depot was built in '06, so we have sort of Victorian-esque. The trash receptacle could be the sort of standard ones that we have around the city. We could have shown those too, but and whatever bike rack apparatus that the commission deems appropriate, we've indicated here. Again, the Washingtonia robustas would be replaced. In the finger planters in the existing parking lot, we would add 2 more jacaranda trees to replace the, how many were there, 2? 3. The 3 along Montecito Street. And then there's the issue of the Canary Island day palm. This is not to sort of counter what the city arborist is saying, but I will point out that when we did the restoration of the train station, we moved. There was an existing Canary Island date palm at the location of the State Street kiosk, which we moved over to the Triangle Park because we had one of the 2 that are in the Triangle Park was dead. And then we brought 2 other palms from Dwight Murphy Field. There's a pretty good collection of them there. We went down and handpicked them, and those were relocated from Dwight Murphy to the west end of the station in that round planter. And also, maybe that was it. Just the west end. So anyway, there were 2 examples of having moved some significant sized trees. So I'm not one to challenge the arborist, but just based on our experience, it may be possible. I think that sort of concludes my presentation. Questions?
I have one question just to preface it. So this plan is now currently under review by Parks and Recreation. It hasn't received a formal approval. Is that correct?
I could answer that. Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the landscape plan and the tree removal plan has been approved, project design approved by Parks and Recs as well as the Street Tree Advisory Committee. However, there was conditions in that to bring back for final design approval.
Okay.
To Parks and Recreation Commission.
So Parks and Recreation Commission has seen the amenities that you proposed on this plan?
No.
Okay,
no, I'm sorry.
Okay,
yes,
that was my question.
No. Yes.
So they have not fully reviewed
right,
everything. Okay,
right.
Very good. All right, questions from Commissioner Drury? No? Okay.
Chair Sitting.
Yes.
Commission, I just wanted to point out a couple other items that the applicant a couple of the items that the applicant has submitted. There's the arborist report. There is a diagram that shows the location of a proposed temporary trailer and a photograph of the potential trailer.
Nice.
In addition, there's a memorandum from the applicant, and within that memorandum, the applicant has indicated that all of the recommendations in the Historic Structures and Sites report, as well as those in the arborist report, would be implemented. And I just wanted to point that out.
I actually forgot to open public comment. I'll open public comment. Seeing no public speaker slips, I'll close public comment, bring it back to Commission for questions. Commissioner Boucher, question.
How long is this trailer going to be here?
The trailer is expected to be 6 to 8 months during construction only.
Thank you. Also, I have noticed that the branch on the fig tree, maybe this isn't the place to ask it, is not doing well. And I wondered what the status report was on that.
Chair, sitting members of the Commission, I spoke to the City Arborist about this a few weeks ago, right after the last hearing on this issue, because somebody asked that question. And what he told me is that there is a fungus on the roots, at least I believe it's a fungus, some kind of growth on the roots that's a disease underneath the kiosk area, and that they're unable to treat that fungus or disease currently because there's impervious surface above it, and the only way they'd ever be able to treat it is to remove all that paving and concrete work in the area and then have access to the roots to
Maybe
treat
that
them.
would be a good idea.
That would be, but it's unrelated to this project, so there's only so much that the project is responsible for.
Try to save the tree.
Commissioner Sharp?
No questions.
Commissioner Murray?
So that date, I guess I was, so what is, yeah, so you are going to relocate it, or
Well,
what's that?
Use your microphone.
Commissioner Murray,
Yeah.
actually, for the purpose of this plan, we're showing it being relocated over here.
Yeah. And it should be okay, right? I mean,
Well, that is-
whatever.
I can't speak to.
Yeah.
There are differing opinions on that.
So, so that means accepting this report, I am assuming, because it's, over here, it says that it's being relocated to that, so that's.
Chair Suning, members of the Commission, I spoke to the consultant who prepared the report and about this late-breaking news. Obviously, it occurred after they had submitted the report regarding the trees' survivability according to the city arborist, and they were comfortable with a mitigation measure that would replace the tree with a tree of the same species in the 20 to 25 foot. Is it brown?
Brown trunk.
Brown trunk.
Did they speak to anything about a different species?
No, but I believe if you wanted to replace it with a different species,
Okay.
that would be
I'm just concerned with the Fusilarium wilt that they're so prone to. But continue. Commissioner Winnick.
We'll stay on the tree for a second. We keep hearing that we have a difference of opinions. Who is the city's arborist in this case? Is it
The
consultant?
city forest superintendent is Tim Downey.
And is Tim Downey the person who prepared the report and the opinion on this tree?
no report. The only report on this tree is the historic structures report, and it discussed the historic significance of the tree rather than the tree's health or ability to survive. Relocation.
So I guess my question is we have an oral or a spoken opinion by the city arborist on the
It was actually
tree.
written communication between staff.
Okay, so it's like an email or
Correct.
something.
Actually, if I may add, Michael, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, the park staff is actually currently reviewing the landscape plans and the tree removal plans, and that's where Mr. Downey notified us immediately what he was his input on the tree relocation.
Because he
Yes.
knew it was coming to HLC.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to get it clarified.
absolutely.
It's like, it's not like we have Bill Spivak has submitted a report or something like that.
Right.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get.
Chair sitting, and on the other side of it is David saying from his experience they will survive. So
I understand that. We'll get into comments later. I'm just doing the questions. Thank you. So the other questions that I have are really about the site amenities. And I'm just looking at this. I'm kind of curious. Oh, all right. The question I have is just in terms of precedent, and so I'll ask you, David, about the signage. Are there examples in the historic district that we would find this particular manufacturer's signage? I'm just kind of curious. What's the precedent for this particular one?
So. That will come to sign.
Okay, so the answer is no, there is no precedent.
Thanks. And the other question I have is why in particular is the bike rack in the location that it's in? What was the determining factor for locating it?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, well, I mean, we're not married to this location. We just thought it was convenient because it was close to pavement. You know, when people come riding up on bicycles, they can put their bike here as opposed to going between cars here, or there's really not enough room anywhere else on Montecito Street or the entrance to the depot. We just felt that was appropriate. And there is a jog here already. Mm-hmm. And so we just felt it was appropriate location. But we're open to any other suggestions you may have.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Arias, question or comment? Questions? Jeez.
What are the dimensions of the tunnel, of the culvert? Yeah, length, width, and height. Well, I'm not interested in the length, but the width and height.
Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, there's actually two box culverts. One culvert box is 18 feet wide by 6 feet high.
So there's two of them
Yeah,
side
there's
by
two of
side
them
would
side
be
by side.
36 feet
Yes.
wide.
Okay, and what, living next to a box culvert, what measures are you taking to make them secure from housing and tagging and things like that?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the culvert is actually subsurface. It's underground.
So there will be no
Yes.
access?
There, as far as for maintenance access, there will be, I don't have the actual engineering drawings right now to find out where the manhole access holes will be at, but it is large enough for maintenance, to taking out debris. Michael?
Chair, sorry, members of the Commission, this issue was brought up in the environmental impact report for the project. The segment that's before you today will be totally subterranean. There will be no way to access it for now. But in the future, it will open up. And at that time, the project is required to have some sort of barrier, mechanical barrier, to people coming into that area to do anything that they want.
It can be a real problem.
That is correct,
Yes,
and that's
yes.
why they came up with that solution. But the exact design is yet to be brought before
Okay.
you.
As long as you keep those concerns and address them while it's being constructed, that's good.
Any other questions, Commissioner Reese?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Schellenberger?
I think the first one is for staff. I'm not clear as to exactly what we're reviewing today. It looks like we're only seeing a landscaping plan, but yet project design approval is being requested for the entire project. Are we only trying to give project design approval to the landscape today?
I
And
believe,
if not, where's
the
the...
Chair, sorry, members of the Commission, this project would involve the large excavation through the site, installation of a subterranean reinforced concrete culvert, will be covered back over, and the parking lot will be put back pretty much the same as it is today, with some embellishments, including those parts of street furniture that would be located that David described a little bit earlier. So David, I believe, would come back with the actual design of the street furniture, the trash cans, the benches, the bicycle rack, and the irrigation plan.
You know what? I think I might have phrased that poorly. I do understand that this is, in essence, a landscape review of it's what the project is, but I recall from the last review at Montecito Street, there were specifically some structures that were shown in the engineering drawings, and it was discussed at that time that there would be elevation drawings and or cross sections and details for there was something that goes into a slope, if I'm remembering correctly. There was a retaining wall and some type of barrier between the two new trees there. And I think there's architectural review required of those structures. And if we're not seeing those today, I'm not sure how we give project design approval to that aspect of the project.
Yeah, and let me just tag along to that too, because if we give it project design approval without the benefit of Parks and Recreation's comments, then we're sort of superseding their authority, and to me that's problematic. It is their land, it is their park. They haven't provided comments to us or to the applicant really on this design, so it's a little bit of a cart before the horse, if you ask me. And I certainly think that Parks and Recreation Commission needs to look at this before we make any formal approvals or maybe the benefit, I guess, of doing this is that they will have our comments, but I really don't think we should be giving it project design approval at this stage.
I also wanted to find out, Michael, if did the park read this report and know what its conclusions are as far as, the
historic
so
structures report?
they've got that report and they've read this.
I do not believe they have a copy of it.
Okay. Well, see, this is the thing that because we are operating by the findings of this report, and whatever recommendations.
But we have to
Yeah.
have a approval of the HLC's report before we can use it, so that's why we haven't given it to
but
them.
I mean, for the park to not know what's going on with this report and just be, you know what I mean? To me, it's an additional for your information. These are the conclusions of a historic report that is basically accepted by staff and
the HLC.
and the HLC. And so, once this is accepted, this is what I'm operating on. So that's why I'm asking about the trees. Now, these other amenities are not addressed in this report. And so I think I agree with the chair that there is this, reluctance to give approval of something we don't quite get a sense of.
Yeah. But, however, I think the applicant could benefit from our comments. So, were you finished with your question? I'm sorry to step on your feet there. Yeah. I have one question. May I? Why are these 5 Washingtonia Mexican fan palms being removed and replaced?
As opposed to, well, they have to be removed as part of the construction.
I understand if they're within the footprint of the culvert. Is that's just close enough that it has to be because of over X, all that stuff?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to have more than one question. Is then that's fair then to say that this finger planter will be wiped out completely? Same with this finger planter because of your over excavation. Basically, this whole parking lot within a probably 50-foot swath is just going to be obliterated.
Removed and reconstructed.
Removed and reconstructed. Okay. Is there anything precluding us from changing the location of the replacement palm so that we get more palms along this stretch of parking lot? Because I understand that you cannot plant between here and here. The box culvert is too shallow. You don't have the planting depth. But that goes against what our parking guidelines are with a tree every 8 spaces. And I understand the constraints, but I'm getting into a comment. So is there anything that precludes us from rearranging these planters, maybe shifting down, adding another?
Mr. Chair, I'll just give you my perspective. One, we sort of with that particular layout, we've sort of established an historic marker, if you will, because this was the layout that was approved in whenever 2000, and as such, this is the historic site. That being said, the other issue is when we decided to even use palms, because I'm not sure at the time that we identified that they were an historic plant material at the time. Most of the other plant materials on the site are, but our thinking was at the time that we wanted to use a tree that would not obscure the view of the fig tree, particularly for those coming in on the train. And so we wanted to just sort of minimize the amount of plant material in those finger planters as such. And so given the spacing, the spacing may have had something to do with just that at the time. And I do remember that was the reason we had palms there, and we explained that to the commission at the time, and that was acceptable to them.
Okay. Final answer?
It is.
Okay. Comments? Commissioner Schallenberger?
Yeah, first, I think that we've sort of focused on some minutia, but in general, I think the plan is perfectly acceptable, and I think that Mr. Black has been sensitive to the historic setting here, and what is proposed is generally acceptable, and I think even in the presentation, there was some requests for direction as far as site furnishings and that kind of thing. So I can support the plan in general. As far as the furnishings, I think maybe just pick a theme. You know, if you want to do, like you said, the ones that are on State Street and those. But I do like the comment that you made about the Victorian era of the train stations. Maybe study what was done at the train station during the renovation. Maybe there are some benches there, and then pick a trash receptacle and a bike rack that goes within that theme. But either one or the others, either or is fine. I don't really have a comment on the sign. I don't really have a, well, I'll just say that. I don't have a comment on the sign. And then one comment just on the quantity of Mexican fan palms. I just noticed in the schedule it said 4, but I think from counting the symbol, I think there's 5. Maybe
5 that are being replaced, correct?
Yeah. And then as far as coming back, you know, for whatever approvals in the future, I would like to see the other structures expressed and represented somehow. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Schallenberger. Commissioner Rios, comments?
First of all, I think the report was very well done. And the requirements that are spelled out in the report, for instance, the granite boulders to be saved and reused, the location of the 2 spur lines monitoring by a qualified architect, the vintage railroad line being protected and a qualified architect being there. The digital folders, photographs to be taken, and the replacement pavement to match the color. And I think what I would suggest again is that a subcommittee of HLC, though we did manage to go to the airport, take a look at that to make sure that it is the same. My main concern that I see is that with the removal of the trees, I would like to see that the landscaping on Montecito Street blocking 101 really be enhanced to as a significant amount as possible to preserve the historic atmosphere of the area instead of these cars and trucks rushing by and things like that. And so that is one area that I would really like to see a concentration of planting that would be effective to screen the area. I think it's going to be a very difficult job. It's going to have to be not unlike threading a needle. And I hope it can be done well without really affecting the historic nature of this area, because it's important to the city.
Threading the needle through a train station.
No, not necessarily, but...
Commissioner Winnick, any comments?
Yes, I'm in favor of the project moving forward, because we're doing conceptual comments at this point,
right.
if I'm not mistaken.
We're not going to take a motion.
I think our comments are instructive. I think the landscape plan is good. I also concur with Commissioner Schallenberg that it would be good to see whatever other architectural features or structures are occurring at the edge of the culvert and get elevations of those. I'm in favor of the idea of researching the site features based on what was done at the time of the train station renovation, and maybe historically what might have been at the train station even before. They may not have been on top of it in the last renovation, you never know. In terms of the signs, since I asked a question about that, I was mainly asking, the sign looks like it's a different language than the rest of the street furnishing, so I would just like to see it be in the same kind of language.
Yes.
Probably, maybe in this case, round components, since everything else seems to be that way. The location seems fine. My only concern about the bike rack is I'm not sure if I really like seeing it in the context of the Morton Bay tree. That's why I was asking about its location. I don't really know of a better location for it, but the problem with bike racks is the bike racks usually look quite nice. It's the problem when the bikes are mounted on it and left behind that they don't look so good. So maybe if it's not a requirement to have the bike rack, maybe consider not having it if we can't find a great location. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Murray, comments?
Yes. I generally agree with the plan because I remember the 1999 plan, and see, one of the things they try to achieve, if you look at this picture, and so they were trying, as I recall from the report from Alex Cole, they were trying to keep the same sort of sense, and so adding this palms were just the same, that feeling of openness, and yet some skyline that will not obscure the view. So I think that is something to keep. Since '99, it was very, I remember just over meetings and meetings, trying to achieve what would have been the closest way of the period of significance for the train depot. So I am okay with the placement of this and not adding more. I guess that's my, I would be different from that. I also agree with adding furniture there. That to me is sort of the sacred space, near the Moreton Bay tree. So I concur with those comments. I think the furniture you have to be very sensitive with just the way you were designing. And I think it's good to go back to that plan. I don't know if that landscape plan from '99 exists. It'd be good to really look at that again and see but I just remember the vision from that. As much as I like screening, this report said that those cherry bushes are really not part of the historical context of this train depot. So as much as I agree with Judy that, seeing the freeway is not a good idea, on the other hand, I would not want to introduce something that really was not part of the...
Can I clarify?
Yeah, anyway, go.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
The trees are going to go.
Yeah, they have to go, yeah.
And so we couldn't be planting on Montecito Street, which would screen the freeway and wouldn't interfere with the...
Oh, I see. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, it's on Montecito Street.
Okay.
Where they're talking about, between Montecito and...
Oh, all right. I thought you want them back.
Correct.
If I could interject, the fact of the matter is the bush cherries don't really provide screening for the freeway because their canopy is up high.
Okay, that's enough. Comments? Commissioner Sharp?
Yes,
Comments.
thank
Sorry.
you. I agree with the comments we've been talking about, and I additionally wonder if it wouldn't be prudent to replace the lawn in an interesting shape with more DG and less water needing lawn area.
Less water intensive plant
Yes.
material. Okay, Commissioner Boucher?
I'm having mixed feelings on that comment. I agree with the reason for it. Otherwise, I don't have anything that hasn't already been said.
Commissioner Jury, comments?
No, I do not.
Commissioner Winnick?
Yes, sorry, I forgot one comment I wanted to. I would encourage, if it's possible, I know we have the city arborist report, and I guess eventually it goes to parks no matter what, but from a historic point of view, if this is a historic tree, it would be nice to explore relocating the tree rather than just giving it a death sentence. I've seen trees survive that people thought wouldn't survive.
Yeah, I'll weigh in on that. I disagree with that because the percentage of that tree survival at its mature age is very low when you consider that a tree that is not as old has almost 100% survival. So comparatively speaking, this tree is almost for sure to die, and I would hate to spend resources to relocate that when it does have such a low percentage of survival. So, but then again, if we replace it with a 20 to 25 foot brown trunk height tree, my concern is about the fusarium wilt, which it could very well get. Any new tree could fairly well get. This tree could get it too if you relocate it and stress it. to relocate a tree like this is probably in the neighborhood of, I would say, $8,000 to $10,000. A new tree is probably about $10,000 to $12,000, but we have a much longer life on it. So it's almost the same cost, but we have a very low guarantee rate on relocating it. So I'm in favor of replacing it with a new tree that is 20 to 25 foot brown trunk height. Until just now seeing this picture, I wasn't sure why you relocated it there, but there's almost a matching one across the way. It wasn't labeled, that's why I added the label. So now I understand why you're doing it. Before that, I was going to say it should stay in the same area. I feel pretty strongly that the parking lot needs the missing palm tree. And just so you know, there is a palm tree there now, which we're not. If we were to add another one, we're not changing the historic fabric of that landscape. And as far as the formality of them lining up, I don't know that that's all that important. I would almost want to sneak one, just right in there, just to have more of a breakup between that long line of parking stalls. That's in my opinion, that's not a very attractive parking lot. It is what it is, and I can appreciate why and how it was designed that way. But it's just not a real attractive parking lot. So as much as we can get, I feel, as far as a finger planter and a palm, the better off we are. And we're just really replacing the palm that cannot go. So it's not like I'm asking for more palms necessarily. Oasis, yes. Again, those are my comments. I actually, the proposed sign is unacceptable. It doesn't fit within the guidelines, and I think Mr. Black already knows that. And I'll go from there. So, yes, Commissioner Schallenberger.
I had a question.
We're done with those.
But I'm reinvigorating them. What was the coverage over the culvert where the new lawn is in terms of soil depth?
He's talking about this area right here. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I guess I was sort of leaning to the next question or comment in follow to Commissioner Sharp's comment. So, is that lawn going to survive?
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. So,
sure. I asked that same question first, and I was told 2 to 3 feet.
Yeah.
Which is plenty. Yeah. Okay. And then so I just was thinking maybe that's an opportunity for a DG strip there to bifurcate the lawn. I don't know. Just a thought.
Can I just say?
Question.
May I just say
let
something?
me get Commissioner Murray's comment first, because I think it's following Commissioner Schallenberger's.
I know grass is just not a good thing, but it's such a historic part of this. Yeah, it was the way we saw it, and that's why I think that's why they worked hard to get that grass there. So I just would not want to remove that. Also, it was.
Okay,
so.
Commissioner Orias?
It is reclaimed water, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so that's taken into consideration regarding the grass.
Tim Dunn said it.
Okay, so we're going to continue this indefinitely until you have the benefit of Parks and Recreation Commission review, until we have that benefit too. So, motion for an indefinite continuance made by Boucher.
With our comments?
Yes, with our comments. Second by Winnick.
Is there any time constraints on the city to starting the project?
Funny you should ask.
Before it rains again. No.
Chair, sitting members of the Commission, I believe this project is going to start construction in the next couple of weeks. However, that was why I was scrambling to get you this project as soon as we could. And we were delayed by waiting for the historic structures report, which we finally got. There are some issues that need to be addressed up front. For example, the archaeological issues related to the railroad spur, but I would say close to 95% of the issues are all the icing that's going to be put back on the cake when the hole's being dug and the culvert's been inserted in the ground. I think we're going to be okay. It's most irregular. We're not happy about it. But the problem is that the funding's been approved, the contractors are aboard, the train's leaving the station. So we have to do what we can, and we think that we can still address all of the issues in your purview, having had the historic structures report approved at least. It's a big step forward. The applicants agreed to all the conditions of approval, all the recommendations in that report, which essentially ensure that that one issue that I was concerned about is going to be addressed. The applicants committed to a plan which in front of you is substantially there but needs to be detailed, and you need to see elevations and sections through that wall. The irrigation plan, the detailed landscape plan.
Okay. Well, we've had a motion. I need to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. So I think you can start your construction, but you need to come back with the icing.
We'll see you in 2 weeks. We're on our way as fast as we can.
Now, I gave you an indefinite continuance. Would you rather have 2 weeks?
We could come back in 2 weeks if we were ready, but we're not going to be because they're not going to get to talk. This whole week we're done.
Okay. So indefinite then.
We still need to go back to Parks and Recs,
right.
yes.
Okay, indefinite. And I apologize, but this has nothing to do with you. On the review of item number 3, 1321 Alameda Padre Serra that received final approval, there is a 10-day appeal project for that, if any. Appeal period. Excuse me, thank you. For that project.